right, YouTube connecting. All right, Mr. Rich, the show is all yours whenever you'd like it. So you just let me know.
All right, let's do it. Crazy. Okay. Thank you all for coming back to the Black and Rich Podcast. Podcast designed for black entrepreneurs to learn how to get in business, stay in business, and be able to pass on generational wealth. I know I talk in the podcast about how I want the community to learn how not just to be rappers and actors and athletes. For this episode, I want to invite an artist on the show. How do you become successful as an artist while maybe not going full-time? I think a lot of artists think, if I'm going to make it, this is going to be my life, this is all I'm going to do. But a lot of times it's burnout. So how do you actually have another job? How do you actually build it up until you're at the point where you can go fully independent? So this week, I'm very excited. A personal friend of mine that I've known probably over a year or two now.
Yeah.
We've done events together. I'm getting used to his new stage name, so I apologize if I say it wrong. But Tarli. Right?
Tarli, yes. Tarli, yes.
Tarli.
Yes, sir.
So tell me, how did you first, or did you always know you wanted to do music, or was that something that came up later, or have you just, hey, I'm going to be an artist no matter what?
Yeah. Well, originally, like growing up, I'm Liberian, so like soccer was a big thing in my family. So like, at first I was like, okay, I'm going to be a pro soccer player. That was going to be the thing, right? As time went on and life kind of happened, it was like it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. I didn't have the time or necessarily the dedication or the resources to really continue to participate in soccer. So I found music, right? So one of my guys, he's originally from Arizona. We met in high school, and he's like, hey man, let's just make music. I'm like, what do you mean? Let's rap. Because previously, I'd been in like, played the cello for 5 years, played the piano for 6. And so like, I was like, yeah, I can do music, but like, it wasn't my first passion. So he started talking about hip hop. And so we started making songs, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, this isn't too bad. And so it kind of went from rapping in my buddy's basement to like what it is now. Just, it's always transformed. But yeah, it's just like a passion I picked up pretty much in high school.
Yeah. So did you always, when you first started doing it, it was kind of more of a hobby, and then you said, I'm going to make this into something more? Or kind of when you started, you always thought, like, this would be cool to be more than that?
I think I know it started off as a hobby. It was really a way for me to build community since I was out of sports. Like, I love team sports because there's a camaraderie. There's an objective goal that we're all trying to get to, right? So rapping, I started rapping in a group. That was my first thing, right? And so that kind of gave me the same sense of camaraderie. So really it was a hobby just to, like, take up time and just to keep my mind off of things that were going on in my life at that time. Yeah. So it started off as a hobby, and then as we, as that group got like more like press and more attention, I was like, oh, this could actually be a thing that I do. You know what I mean? Because I continued to meet a lot of cool people along the way.
Yeah. Was there something that clicked, or was there a moment you can think of that you thought, oh, this can be something more than a hobby?
Ooh.
Is there something specific you can think of, or someone you met that kind of inspired you or something?
I can't think of one thing specifically. It's been kind of a combination of little things like, being on festivals or having conversations with folks about like, hey, your music inspires me, right? Because I talk a lot about my music like being a first generation, Liberian immigrant, right? And there's like parallels and overlays that, I've realized through like being on the road and touring that like other people who may not be immigrants can also relate to, right? Trying to fit in, trying to figure out what their purpose is, what their goal is. So, yeah. So it's just like a combination of like me inspiring folks and folks then inspiring me by their comments, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I mean, the positive feedback kind of, you start it and then you're like, is this real? And people are like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were the steps for you? Was there, I'm not musical at all. I wish I was, but let's say you put out a song. How does that process get to touring? Like, how do you, I know there's a lot of steps, but how do you go from I want to do music to I'm actually making money doing music?
That's a loaded question. So I'm going to answer kind of like just chunks here. So when I first started, I was in high school, and back then it was about burning CDs and pressing them up and passing them out, right? And getting them into the hands of people that needed, like talent agents, talent buyers, or just consumers in general, right? To get the word out, right? So you'd have the street team that would go out and do that. As time went on, the internet, right, changed everything. And so then it became, hey, let's post about the events. Let's talk about these more in the cyber realm, right? To get more people to check it out and to listen to it. So I guess the first thing is, just starting up and getting like the equipment for it, right? So when I first started, I was, renting out studios, and after a while it just became very obvious, like there's a lot of money that I'm spending to pay somebody to record my music. Why don't I just buy all this equipment myself and start recording myself and learning how to do that? Because that's another step to being self-sufficient and then to cutting out costs, right? And so,
how much does a studio session cost in general?
I mean, depending on who you're working with, anywhere from $25 to $100 an hour.
An hour?
I mean, I'm sure there's some studios that go higher than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. So just imagine $100 an hour. So the minute you walk in there, whether you're on time or you're 30 minutes late, that clock's already ran, right? So, and then you got to think about it too, like, if you have a song that you're still experimenting with, that you're still kind of like, hey, I'm not too sure, then you got to kind of iron that out. You got to work through that, and that's still a process, and you're still on the clock for that, right? Wow. So there's not really, you know what I mean? Like, hey, time out. I'm trying to figure this out. The clock's running regardless, and so.
So what does the average? How many, on average, is one studio session? How many hours of studio equals a song? Would you say?
It depends.
Yeah.
It honestly depends. I mean, you do a lot of the writing up front, right? And you prep it. You're like, okay, from sonically, from how I hear this in my head, it should sound like this, so it should be quick. But sometimes you lay it out and you're like, there's something missing. It's not quite there yet, right? And you're sitting there kind of like trying to figure out what the missing piece is, what the missing ingredient is. And who knows? There's songs that I have right now in the vault that are like, yep. I've completed as much as I possibly can with the knowledge and resources I have right now. I'm going to hold on to it and wait, maybe, check again in maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and like, okay, now I understand where I was stuck at. Now I can finish it. Does that make sense?
Wow.
Or maybe I was missing a bass player, or I was missing a certain artist,
So it's a pretty big investment going in. Like, you don't know. You sometimes have studio sessions, it all clicks and it's quick, and then sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 sessions.
Yep. Wow. It just depends on the song. It depends on the mood of everybody and who's all involved. Yeah.
And then, so kind of because of those prices, you built your own studio, you did your own thing. How'd that work?
Yeah. So what I did first was I collaborated with a group called Cherry Sky at the time, and we kind of all pieced together like, hey, I'll get the computer, somebody bring the monitors, somebody's got the preamp, and we all put our resources together, and we ran a studio out in Lower Town in St. Paul for quite some time, right, in the Golden Building, right across from CHS Field. For a while, and then after Cherry Sky shut down and disbanded, I then bought all the materials that the equipment that I was missing, so to speak, and put everything in my basement. So that was the next step to make everything just once again at my house and just one-stop shop.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the group kind of disbanded.
Yeah.
Was that something that was tough for you, or do you like just keep it moving?
It was tough for me because I'm like I said, I'm a community dude. So like when I invest in like a group of people, I invest hard, right? So it was tough to say, okay, so throughout my entire career, I've been a part of, I'd say 4 different groups, right? And each group is kind of like a different like version of me, right? So when I first started, I was in this group called D-Mine, right? And it was kind of like the LMFAO of the suburbs. If that, you know what I'm saying? Just to like paint the picture, right? So we got the colorful glasses, we got the colorful vans, everything's matchy-matchy, and that's how we started. Then I moved on to a 3-piece rapper group called the Escape Artists, and around that time I was also in Cherry Sky. So the Escape Artists was kind of like conscious rap, and then Cherry Sky was like kind of like the boom bap rap, right? So I'm kind of living in 2 different realms of writing and presentation, right? And so so that group ended, so D-Mine ended, the Escape Artists ended, Cherry Sky ended. So I'm like, okay, do I start another group or do I invest 100% in myself to be a solo artist? And that was the next move for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're in these groups.
Yeah.
Is there criteria for getting a show or getting a performance? Do you pay for those? Do they reach out to you? How does that work? kind of like your first couple shows?
First couple shows, it's definitely you got to bootstrap it. You know, you got to go out there and talk to folks. I mean, the biggest thing starting out was networking, going out to other shows, checking out other venues, right? So growing up, it was like, all right, so I lived out in Shoreview at the time, and so it's like, all right, we got to go to Minneapolis and, you know, let's check out the Dinky Towner. You know, if you know, folks are old enough to know the Dinky Towner, that one, you know, that one closed down a while ago. Or learning about all these other venues in Minneapolis. To kind of figure out, like, okay, like, I could see myself performing here, or no, this isn't going to be like a spot where I could bring my crowd here. You know what I mean? And then networking with, okay, so who's the coordinator, right? Back then, it was just a lot of hunting and pecking, so to speak. Like, hey, do you know who like put the show together? Hey, do you know who the promoter is? Hey, do you know what I mean? And networking that way, and then saying, hey, you know, here's my demo, here's my CD. Let's talk. Let's get some stuff going. And yeah, in the beginning, that's definitely that. And I mean, still to this day, there's still a lot of that. Like, hey, I'm out here, just dropped a new project, email, you know, hey, following up. Hey, you know, you have a festival in so-and-so location. I'd love to be a part of that. You know, so it's a lot of just research and looking around.
So in general, for those type of performances, are those paid performances, or are this kind of a mix?
I mean, there's definitely a mix. When you're starting out, there's definitely a mix. You're at least for me, like in my career, I did a lot more paid performances early on in my career, and then I had to make the switch, right? Because at some point you're like, yeah, exposure is cool, but like I in order to maintain the equipment that I have, in order to pay the artist that I'm performing with, the band that I'm performing with, in order to pay the mastering engineer, whomever, I need to make some money. And so after a while, it took I took a firm stance in saying, okay, you know what, I need to make, you know, X amount of dollars before I go on a stage or I perform, because at this point I'm kind of working against myself. I have the credentials, I have all the shows that I've performed at, I have all these things that I could stand on and say, hey, I should be paid for my work, right? Because I put in the time and I do have the resume, so to speak.
I think that's a big point I want to make for a lot of new artists. Is I think people think, you know, I make a good song, I make something, people are gonna reach out to me. Or people are going to start paying me right away, and that's not the case for most people, right?
Yeah, I would say that's not the case for a lot of people. And I mean, I want to stress, and I stress to the artists that I manage too, I'm like, look, a good song is where it starts, right? But that is literally, that's like the starting point. That we're at zero, right? The next step is to, hey, who are we talking to in the network that can push this song, right? Who can we plug this song with? How do we market this? How do we roll this song out to get it to generate interest in it, right? Because there's tons of songs going on. I just read an article about, like, I think there's 16,000 songs a day that go out on Spotify. So think about the artists that are putting that out. Think about how much content is constantly being pushed at whomever, and who knows how much marketing is behind everyone, right? So really, you got to go above and beyond to create and execute a marketing plan to get your stuff out there and to get it the best exposure, so to speak, or get in as front of as many people as possible, right? Because just having a cool song doesn't necessarily do it. And I run into a lot of artists that are like, oh man, I'll just TikTok, and I'm like, there ain't nothing wrong with TikTok. Like, definitely do that, but there's got to be other avenues. It's a mix of things, right? That you got to make sure that you're also prepared for.
So would you say there's more to being an artist just the music, right? Like 50% of it's just, a lot of people make good music, right? Like,
yeah,
what separates the people who are making it to people who are not. A lot of it's just marketing. Who do you know?
Yeah, it's that. But you know, one thing that this guy that I met, his name's Brad Franklin. Shout out Brad Franklin. He told me it's about telling a story, right? Like, tell your story. Like, what separates your art from somebody else's art, right? Everybody's making great music, but what is your story, right? Because your story is what's going to draw people in and be like, you know what, I can relate with that guy. Hey, I'd actually go out and hang out with that guy, or I'd go get a drink with that guy, that person, whomever it is, right? That story is such a critical piece in order to then present your music to a broader audience.
Definitely. So then you've gone on tours, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get from filming in your basement to doing shows to going on tour? How does that look like? What's that process?
shout out the internet. A lot of it comes down to networking, right? So Brad Franklin, he runs a festival called Jackson Indie Music Week, right? And so I just went online. I always search like festivals, things to like get involved with, right? And they were looking for artists and applications. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm going to apply for this festival in Jackson, Mississippi. Never been there once, but I'm going to try it out. And things worked out. We went down there and we performed. Now I know Brad, right? Yeah. And then I also met Marcel P. Black, right? And so I end up meeting these artists that are also on their quest as well, right? And we're sharing information. We're doing show swaps, right? So, hey, I'll bring you out to my city, promote it, get you in front of some folks. At a later point in time, I'm assuming we're going to do the same. You're going to do the same, right? Yeah. And just by networking, then it's like, okay, well, Marcel's been on tours pretty much everywhere throughout the country. He got connections and plugs and resources that I wasn't privy to, right? And so by networking with him and just networking with anybody, I was able to say, okay, well, I want to do this. Can you help? Oh, yeah, I got this guy. Talk to him, and you can put it together, right? So a lot of it's just networking and sometimes taking those shows that aren't paid, or you're not staying at the DoubleTree, all inclusive, all free, yeah. and taking that risk, because really, in my journey, it's about the networking portion of it, who you're meeting, that really gets you to that next level or opens up more doors.
Yeah. So while you're doing this, you had another job the whole time, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've always been working a full-time job and or being going to school, getting a degree.
So how do you balance the two, where you're doing the music and because you're working 40 or 50 hours a week, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it just kind of depended on the season. So there was points where being in a group had its benefits, right? Because I didn't have to do necessarily all the heavy lifting myself when I'm, working a full-time job and going to school, right? So that also served a purpose where I'm like, all right, I can contribute when I can contribute, and then I go out and do my thing. After I graduated, it was like, okay, well now I have more time, so to speak, right? So how do I do that? And so finding jobs and finding like roles where I'm able to make an earning for myself and also invest, but still allows me flexible like free time, right? So finding a job that's a 9-to-5er, right? So then I have the weekends and evenings to continue to pursue music, whether that's doing a show or recording or just having a networking session.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important thing that a lot of musicians miss. I talked about at the beginning is people think that if I'm not going 100% full-time at this, I don't really believe in my dreams. But that's just not a realistic thing for most people. If you don't have income coming in for studio sessions, for album releases, for parties, for all these things, you're not going to have enough money, right?
Yeah, it's a costly game. I starting off, I was pretty naive. I was like, it's so funny to think back. I was like, okay, so started rapping at like 16 or whatever. I was like, all right, back then Bow Wow was the thing, right? So I was like, all right, so if I don't make it by 18 or 19, I'm not anything, And so as I got older, I was like, oh, that's I totally just made that up. It doesn't matter, because as we see now, like the greats are still doing it, right? Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, Nas, they're still doing their thing and they're being amazing with it. They're thriving, right? But yeah, it's you got to figure out a way to still bring in income and still be able to promote, because there's so much cost associated with music, right? Regardless if you're paying for like, promo ads on Facebook or Instagram or studio time or equipment. So it was always important to me to make sure that money was coming in, even though I was continuing to invest in this passion.
No, that's great. You also have a Airbnb you run, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think for new artists, especially as financial advisor, I'm talking to people really think that they have, I don't know what the mindset is, that the all or nothing type mindset that really affects people.
But that's what that's what's been drilled into our head, right? Like either you go at this 100% or don't show up at all. And I would beg to differ that there's a way to do it gradually, right? There was a book called oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the title, but like something about starving artists, right? And they essentially what they brought up was points about like Tom Clancy being a lawyer, but also writing his books, right? They were talking about other artists that had other side hustles to bring in money and generate income, before saying, okay, I'm completely out of this game and now I'm going to only focus on books. And I think that those stories aren't told because we romanticize yeah, man, I was, I had nothing. I was in this type of dire situation. And one day somebody just showed up and said, here's a check for $1 million and I blew up. Right. And I mean, stories, miracles, stuff like that do happen. I'm not negating that, but I think to bank on that sets you up for failure, right? And I think there's a benefit in gradually, coming up and understanding things and seeing things, understanding the business, right? Because if you blow up today and you don't understand, hey, how am I getting paid? How do royalties work? What is ownership? How does ownership affect how this all works out? You end up being in a bad spot too.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So are you independent right now? Do you have a label? How does that kind of work with your art?
Yeah, so I'm independent right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're independent, because you're on, I know I've listened to you on Apple Music, on Spotify.
Yeah.
So if you're a new artist, how do you get on those platforms?
So you'd go to a distributor, so like a TuneCore or a DistroKid. You would upload your artwork, you'd upload your music, of course, and then also say, hey, who worked on this project? What are the splits, so to speak? Like, so, should your producer get 50% and you get 50%? Should this person get 25%? Whatever the case is, and then you submit that. Usually the best practice is to make sure that you're submitting that song about like 8 weeks prior to your release date. So then you can also submit the songs to like Spotify editorial playlists and stuff like that. It gives you another option to, maybe land on a bigger playlist and stuff like that.
So when you submit a work, is it basically guaranteed you're going to get on? Like, what's the process? Is there criteria you have to meet before they let you on the platform for like Apple Music, Spotify? Or is just kind of submitting it, you automatically get on?
Well, that's a tough one, right? Because if you follow the criteria that DistroKid says, hey, your artwork has to be this frame, and there's copyright laws too, right? So you can't just take a Tupac song and be like, yeah, it was me.
It's a sample.
yeah, that was me. What are you talking about? This sure sounds like Hit 'Em Up. I don't know. But yeah, there's rules to that, right? But yeah, for the most part, you're on, right? Which once again goes to the point of 16,000 songs a day that go on to Spotify, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't know why I always thought there was like criteria, like you have to have a certain amount of, but I guess platforms just want as much music as they can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you got on platforms, you started touring. What is like the economical landscape? I know as a kind of independent artist, are you trying to get on radio? Is there other platforms you're trying to break into to get bigger, or kind of what's your goal now?
Yeah, so my goal now is to work on getting like sync licensing, right? So getting onto like TV shows, ads, video games, things like that, right? Where you have royalties coming in and you get like sync fees for that too, right? That's another way where it's kind of like having so to speak, having your money work for you, where you submit a song to like a publisher, they have it in their database, and let's say Viacom or MTV or VH1 or whatever want to use your instrumental, use your song for like a Real Housewife episode, right? They can pull it from there. They submit a cue sheet, and then that shows that you've been selected, like they use your music for that particular episode at this particular time for this amount of length, and then after you go as far as every time that episode gets played, you're getting royalties for that.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I have 25 placements right now on like TV shows like Snoop and Martha. The latest one, and I haven't seen it myself. It's Devil Girl and hold on, it's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. It's Marvel comic or Marvel like TV show.
You're in a Marvel movie.
It's not a movie. Hold on, don't say it's a movie.
Marvel show.
Don't jump on me. No, it's like a cartoon on Disney Plus.
Really?
Yeah.
So you can listen to your music on Disney Plus right now.
Yeah. So they use the instrumental from Memories from my last project on like a little like a moment of in the TV shows they like, oh yeah, here's the moment where I realized I was wrong. But yeah, I got a chance to like check that little section. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, so every time the episode's played, you're getting a couple dollars or something.
I'm getting something. Yeah, so to speak. Yeah.
That's insane. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And you have a new project out, don't you?
Yes.
So what's that project?
So Ganta. So Ganta is a project that I put out. And so the other thing too, like, we talk about funding. I just want to give a shout out to like Springboard for the Arts, which is a really great organization for artists to, hey, if you need, just career advice, if you need information on taxes, if you need information on just anything music related or career wise, they have a resource that can point you in the right direction. And so Ganta was actually funded by a grant that I wrote and I received from the State Arts Board.
Wow.
So yeah, shout out to State Arts Board and Springboard for the Arts, because that's kind of how the trajectory of how I found this, right? So Ganta is a 6-track EP, and it's named after a small town that near where my grandma grew up, and for her that was like the big city. Right, because she grew up in northern Liberia, and that was like the big city for her. She always wanted to live there, and it was kind of like the New York, if you will. And so life has taken her from like the villages in Liberia to like New York to Pennsylvania to Minnesota to all these other places, but she never made it to like Ganta. She never had her place in Ganta, and so I named it Ganta because I feel like there's a place that we're always trying to get to, but sometimes we get distracted. You know what I'm saying? Where we end up having to kind of take the long road to get to where we want to go. And so this is kind of like theme music, energizing music. So like, okay, we're going to get there, right? But we're facing the troubles, we're facing the whatever, what have you, right? And then there's some songs in there that are just kind of like, all right, we're on the way, let's go. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like let's get amped up, because this is what it is. So that's pretty much the long and short of Ganta.
That's deep. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm not musical literate at all, so album, what does EP mean?
It's just a shorter album. Yeah, shorter album, so to speak. Yeah. So six tracks, and one of the tracks is actually a remix done by my DJ Medieval.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so the new track comes. Is it currently out?
It is currently out. You can stream it on all streaming services, Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp. Bandcamp would be great because Bandcamp you actually get paid more for your music than Spotify and Apple Music.
Okay.
But it's also on like Google Play and all those other places too.
Oh, we'll get links on for everybody.
Yeah.
So kind of what is your opinion? And this might be a little deep.
Oh.
I've heard a lot of back and forth on streaming and musicians. A lot of musicians are kind of complaining about you make $0 from streaming services.
That's true.
So what does that look like for you, kind of, when it comes to streams? Like, how many streams do you need for $1?
Oh man, I wish I had the little stat chart. So because I've seen this chart go out in a lot of my music circles where it's like you need a million views or a million plays for like $900 or something like that, right? No, yeah, it's something astronomical because it's not like 1 penny for every stream. It's like 0.000 something. Right, and so really, your bread and butter as an artist is going to come from merch sales. It's going to come from like performing and doing tours. Right, that's where you're going to make your money from. Like, the streaming platforms. I see it as just like, hey, here's an intro. Right, so really, my music's right there next to your favorite artist. You can check me out if you like me. You can invest. If you don't, you can put me on the playlist, and I'm still there. Right, and so it's kind of like a teaser introductory. Product, so to speak, to get people into wanting to know who you are as an artist.
That's why branding's so important, right?
Absolutely.
It's the merch and because $1 million for $900 is nothing.
Yeah,
I feel like 1 million views on YouTube should get you a lot more money than that.
Yeah, and once again, I'm just throwing out like just numbers, but it's like it's not too far off because you're not making a ton of money off streaming. No. I don't know who. I mean, the top tier artists are. Obviously, the Weekends and the Drakes and what have you. But not everybody's that.
So with albums now, are people still releasing CDs? Do you have a CD people can buy? Is that still a thing?
It's tough. I got a jump drive this time around, right? Okay. So funny story. So I was in New York doing a tour, and we did this show. We were in Astoria. Yeah, we were in Astoria. We did this show. This guy comes up to me. He's like, hey, man, I really loved your music. I loved, everything you did. He's like, I bought a CD, but I'm going to be honest with you. I can't play this CD because I don't have a CD player, right? And I sat there, and I was like, he's like, I don't have a car. I'm in New York, right? Yeah. And I don't have a CD player at my, and some cars don't even come with CD players, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have a CD player in my, my place. So, like, I am buying this to support you. And I was like, That's wild, man. I appreciate you doing that. So it kind of got me thinking on the next round when I dropped a project, right? Ganta, I'm like, okay, thumb drives, right? Like folks still use thumb drives. You can, put the music on it, upload it, do what you want to do with it, and then you can still continue to use it, and it has my logo and branding on it. So
Nice.
That was the next way to go with it.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other events coming up that people can go to or support you at?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. July 22nd, I'm actually doing a free show. It is and let me get it right. It's the Selby.
It's coming up. That's
Yeah, it
3
is.
days.
Yeah, it is coming up. So actually, I gotta book out of here for band practice. Actually, right after this this interview. But no, it's a Selby block party, and it's celebrating the Rondo Community Land Trust. So they've been around for 30 years. And then it's July 22nd, 1 to 4. Once again, Selby Avenue, and it's free. It's a community event. Come out, check out. There's other artists on there, of course. Yeah, it's gonna be a great time.
No, that's great. No, that's sad. I'm coaching, but I might be able to catch a little bit of it.
Okay.
We have a game at 12, so hopefully I can be done in time and come and catch it.
Yeah.
Lastly, I always like to ask people, I know you do a lot of community work.
Yeah.
Kind of, what is some community work you've been doing, and what kind of some passions you have in the community?
Oh man, that's a good one. So currently I work for Minnesota Housing, and I'm a business development rep and event manager for Minnesota Housing. So a lot of my role is talking about like down payment and closing cost loans to like real estate agents, just letting them know that, hey, this program is available if you do have a client that would need it. And talking to lenders about that, kind of like changes and things that are taking place. But the other really cool part about my role, which I'm very passionate about, is the event portion. I get to go into like communities and say, hey, community organizers. So somebody like the Selby Jazz Fest. I'll just use that example. Hey, Selby Jazz Festival, Minnesota Housing would like to be here. Like, can we come out, right? And we set up a table. We bring the real estate agents out. We bring the lenders out, and we just really post up and talk to event goers, right? And just say, hey, just some information, something to think about. If you're looking to buy a home, we have these resources, and we have professionals that specialize in helping first-time home buyers, right? And that's kind of come out of a very tough journey of working in the financial industry, working in banks, where I'm like, will I ever get out? And
Yeah.
so being able to join do government work, right, in the sense where like it's community based. Like I'm always kind of like trying to figure out what can I do to enhance and enrich like communities that are out there that need the help, that need the resources, that need whatever the case is, as far as housing goes, right? That's my my bread and butter, so to speak. But yeah, that's what I do, and I have a lot of fun too, because like once again, it's a community. Like I love community. I love being around people. I love helping people. So.
Yeah. Home ownership is huge.
Home ownership, owning stuff is huge, and I think we talked about this outside of before we got on air. But like I try to tell artists that I manage or like artists that I help. I'm like, look, like it's not a bad thing to own a home, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're tied down to one community. Owning a home has tax benefits, right? You want to turn your basement into a studio, part of it you can write that off, right?
Yeah.
Or hey, you want to, and you also save on costs for renting a space. Obviously depends on your art, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also, hey, you want to go all the way. You want to say, okay, well, you know what? I want to sell my house and move to LA. Okay, cool. So now you can take those proceeds, and now you got some cushion money to go to LA, and you're not trying to couch surf, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like kind of thinking big picture-esque and down the line, and kind of creating a plan where it's like, hey, this isn't where you want to be, and we get that, but by investing, by owning, you can get there at some point, right? And I always like to like tell artists that, I tell everybody that, but especially artists, like, hey, like this is another vehicle to get you there if you want to do it, right? Just another vehicle.
No, I always tell people, let's say you live somewhere for 20 years, you pay $1,000 a year, right? That's $12,000 a year.
Yeah.
You pay $240,000 you gave to someone else.
Yeah.
That you could be investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And usually cheaper.
Yeah.
Like mortgages, if you can have the down payment, it's usually cheaper than rent.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But well, let's see if we have any questions. Any questions out there? I know there's always a few. Can a new artist make it without being really good in social media today?
I think so. I think that you don't, and I think really good is relative though. But I don't think you need to be necessarily really good. I think you need to be able to network, That's going to be the thing, right? So let's say you're not. So for example, right? So for me, I'm not really good at making beats, right? But I have a group of producers that I work with, and they're really good at making beats. So therefore, I call up and say, "Hey, I need a beat," and they make a beat right then and there, instead of me trying to figure it out. I think that you can maybe network and have somebody else do your social media, right? Or do some type of exchange or some type of trade. So there's that. But I also want to stress the importance of being in person and also putting yourself out there to talk to folks, because I think there's a lot of value when whether you're a booking agent, whoever, seeing like, oh, okay, I get good vibes from this person. All right, cool, like let's talk. So yeah,
that's a good one. What's the state of the music industry? Is it easier or harder to become successful than 10 years ago?
You know what? I think I might have to argue that it's easier, right? So back then, we always had these people that we'd call gatekeepers, right? So these are people that are in positions that would essentially be able to block you or allow you to go through, you know what I mean? Like back in the day, it was like the radio station. Hey, can you play my stuff on the radio? Absolutely not. Okay, where are you going to go, right? Without the internet, right? What were you going to do, right? Now, you know, although there's a lot of other artists coming out, there's a lot more opportunity, if you're able to capitalize on it, to break out, right? Which is why you kind of see a lot of artists that, you know, maybe they got TikTok famous, right? It's like, oh, this song's really cool. I found out, you know? And I think, and I also want to stress, like, for artists or anybody, define success, right? Like, what is success to you, right? Is that touring the world, or is that just saying, hey, you know, I played in front of 2,000 people, that's successful, right? So, I think in most cases, I'd say it is easier now. Yeah.
So what do you picture success being for you? Like, what does that look like for you?
Man, I was just having this conversation with myself on the way here. I would say success is scaling out like I was talking about, like the record label that I kind of have right now, like I'm kind of building up, but it's not official. Scaling it up. Being able to tour regionally and nationally, and also internationally, and also getting, like, you know, once again, more placements, like larger placements on like ads and video games and stuff like that. I think that to me would be like success. Like that would be like, I made it. Like I you know, I'm cool, you know, and so that's where success is for me right now. Who knows? That might change in a little bit, right? But that's where it's at for me right now.
So you don't need to sell out Madison Square Garden or anything.
Nah, man. I mean, that'd be cool, but that's not my aim necessarily right now.
Yeah.
No.
I like that.
What are the best?
What are the best being in local venues?
Oh, what are the best places to hear local hip hop?
Yeah, I think that's what he's asking.
Ooh, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm still kind of learning right now. So COVID took a lot of our great local hip hop venues away from us. So, I mean, I could always say 7th Street. You can hear some good stuff at the Turf Club too. Yeah, I'm actually still exploring that space too, because it's a different landscape than it was before COVID hit. There's, like I said, a lot of venues that we typically go to, like Honey or Part Wolf.
They shut down?
Yeah, they shut down.
Like forever?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of my typical go-tos are no longer around. So I'm still doing some research and figuring out. I think there's the Green Room. I think you can hear some hip hop over at the Green Room too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what did that look like for you during the pandemic? Were you just kind of shut down for 2 years, or were you able to play some places?
I was shut down, but I was fortunate that I was you know, financially safe, right? And I was able to continue to like create music. That was kind of like the pivot in how the direction for Ganta was made, right? Because I had time to, like, the world stopped essentially, and it was like, okay, so what do I want to do? Like, it was like a reset button for like my music and how I want to create and how I want to be presented. So it was, once again, a lot of research, a lot of just kind of asking myself the questions on, like, do I want to make music that I want to listen to, or do I want to make music that, like, for myself, right? And even though that sounds like the same, there are two different schools of thought when it comes to actually creating that music. And so I did the first, and so I'm feeling like I've been doing the latter most of my life, right? Making music that I just want to hear, but like But now that I'm doing the other way, I'm realizing that it's picking up a lot more steam and generating a lot more interest. So I'm like, okay, this pivot now has led to some success.
Would you say it's like a more personal that?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Someone said that T-shirt is fire.
Thank you.
And I agree. I actually, before we came in, I was like, where do you get those shirts? Because you always have like a nice blend of like traditional and then like African shirts, or African clothes, and I don't have that. I need to, whoever you get me in contact.
Yeah, we'll chop it up. Shout out Miss Lisa. Thank you, Miss Lisa.
So how do your artists promote shows locally? Have you been impacted by the closure of city pages and traditional media outlets?
Yeah, we definitely have. Now more than ever, it's Facebook, it's Instagram. That's kind of how I've been promoting shows. I did my EP release the same way, right? No physical flyers. Did a lot of advertising, a lot of just like, hey, texting folks. A lot of just like. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Just social media and texting people, and we had a pretty good turnout, and that's how I've been able to do it. With the city pages and traditional media outlets either closed or maybe not just wanting to cover. Also, radio stations like KFAI, MPS Sounds. Shout out Krista Wax. I was on there. Talking about shows, talking about, you know what I mean? There's other community entities that are also here to help artists as well. So there's that.
Great. Well, looks like that's probably the end of the questions there.
Okay. Cool.
Well, thank you, Tarli. I'm still getting used to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really want to get people to understand. I'm not anti-music. I'm not anti-sports. But I just think that there's better ways that we as a community can go about it. And I think you're a really perfect example of how you can still chase your dreams while being financially sound and still building.
Oh, absolutely. And I share that same sentiment. Even though I am an artist, I'm like, you can still have passions and still chase things and still have a day job and still be great. You know what I mean? And I try to tell, once again, like folks I talk to or artists that ask me questions, I'm like, my day job allows me the ability to pay and get into better situations than just being like, hey, I'm a super good artist, but there's no investment in me. And what I've realized is that if you're not investing in yourself, I mean, some people might invest in you, but it's very rare because they want to see like, hey, I see that you have this really great music, but like, what else do you do? Music is just like the tip, right? Mm-hmm. Like you got to be able to have just different outlets and show folks that that you are investing in yourself, right? In order to attract more people to invest in you, if that makes sense, right?
Definitely. So. No one's gonna believe in you more than you believe in yourself.
There you go.
Put more into it than you put in yourself.
And it shows. You know what I mean? Like on different artists and stuff like that, or just anything really, even outside of artistry.
Definitely. Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for watching the Black and Rich podcast. I hope to see you in 2 weeks. We have another exciting guest. But like I said, we can chase our dreams while still being financially sound. That's something I want to ingrain in our community. There's always a good to have a backup plan and the backup plan to that backup plan.
Yeah.
Just because you can't monetize your dream doesn't mean you can't chase your dreams, but be smart about how you do it. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great night.